Folks, the day of reckoning is here. People have played Tears of the Kingdom. There is actual raw gameplay footage for us to dissect. There are previews and opinions to read through, and that's what we're going to be doing today. Today, I just want to read through 6 different previews that I pulled from IGN, Axios, Polygon, Bloomberg, all these websites, and just read through them. I just woke up from a very short nap. I was up all night playing Xenoblade, and yeah, I kind of forgot that these Zelda previews were dropping, so that's what this video is going to be. I'll do a separate video, probably later today, if not today, then tomorrow, going over actual footage and all that stuff. But I just wanted to make a video kind of reading through all of the opinions and reactions, seeing what people are actually saying about Tears of the Kingdom now that they've got their hands on it. How's the performance? How are the new mechanics? And all of that. So we're going to be reading through all 6 of these previews together, and there are more previews than that. There are, channels with gameplay footage. Good Vibes of Gaming is a great source for that. I think Wall Street Journal did some stuff, right? So, plenty of Tears of the Kingdom stuff to get into now. So let's start off with Polygon, which is what I have up here. I love their headline on the article. Zelda Tears of the Kingdom is a playground for goblins. Yes, I feel like a goblin right now. Nintendo is just daring their best to break Zelda Tears of the Kingdom. I had many questions going into recent hands-on demo with the upcoming open world adventure. How much has Hyrule changed? What role will the zone I try play? Where the hell has Tingle been? But my prevailing curiosity was this. What did Nintendo itself learn from The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild? Which tenets did it credit with the game's runaway success? And which ones did it build upon in the sequel? A quick note about me. I can be a bit of a goblin. I mean, I relate. If a game allows me to peek behind the curtain, I will do so immediately. If a game is promising me freedom of choice, I will exploit that freedom as soon as I can. I love the way this writer's thinking. If a game challenges me to take advantage of its interlocking systems, I will find the spaces in which those systems don't quite coalesce and do my best to emphasize the inconsistency. Simply put, I like to cause mischief. And here we have a new screenshot here fighting one of the big pig bokoblins. I believe this is next to the Sheikah Tower that we actually see other closer looks at in the new footage. So it was with little hesitation that I fused an explosive barrel to my shield within the first 10 seconds of my demo last week. That's awesome. Yeah, they actually put a explosive barrel, which is kind of what I was hoping for. We've seen you can fuse a stick to a rock, we've seen that you can do pretty much anything in terms of fusing with what's in your inventory, but can you fuse other interactable objects in the world? Can you fuse barrels, which we now know you can, which is awesome. Once a bokoblin obliterated himself and 5 of his friends with an errant swing of his club, I knocked an arrow, opened my inventory, fused a bomb flower, which we'll get to the tip of the projectile, and promptly shot a Hinox in the pupil with my makeshift grenade launcher. He didn't die, so I stuck an ancient flamethrower to a tip of a rusty sword and lashed him from afar with my newfound flame whip. His health was dwindling, and all it would have taken to finish him off was one normal arrow, but that's super boring, so I tossed a gob of yellow choo-choo jelly at his feet and caused a localized lightning storm. So this is what this person did. Like 30 seconds into their playthrough, their demo of Tears of the Kingdom. They immediately put a bomb on a shield, put a flamethrower on a rusty sword, and then chucked some choo-choo jelly down to cause an electrified playing field. The amount of interactability in this game, genuinely, from what we're hearing from the press and from what we've seen ourselves, is so unprecedented for any video game. And just to hear it kind of backed up from people that have actually played it is really exciting. And then they said the storm killed them as well. It took dying to pull me out of my experimental fever dream, at which point I realized that Tears of the Kingdom had yet to tell me, you can't do that. Link's new fuse ability allowed me to combine my arsenal of clubs, sticks, and rudimentary swords with virtually anything that wasn't structurally integral to the bokoblin camp where I found myself. Link can also throw most items in his inventory as improvised as grenades, whether it be an apple to momentarily stun foes, or a fire flower to, well, start a fire. I stumbled upon a plant whose leaves had a blinding qualities, so I of course chucked one at an enemy before closing the distance to knock him over the edge of a floating island. I even stuck a rocket to the tip of a spear, threw it like a javelin, and watched a bokoblin careen off into the distance. Can I still call myself an agent of chaos if Tears of the Kingdom seems so delighted by all the chaos I am causing? So, a couple of analysis things here. This little blinding thing here, I'm assuming that's what they're talking about. We saw in the commercial where Link shot an arrow to light up like a flower in the commercial that leaked and then officially got released, so I'm assuming that's what that is. But also that idea of putting a rocket onto your spear and throwing the spear, but then because it's rocket powered, it just keeps going. You just see that bokoblin. You open up your whatever your zoom in is in this game. It's not the Sheikah Slate, and you see the bokoblin going for miles. It's beautiful. It's poetry. It's poetic. And all of this only touches on combat. What about Link's new Ultra Hand ability, which allows him to engineer vehicles out of the resources, natural and otherwise, strewn about Hyrule and the floating archipelago above it? What about Recall, which reminds yada yada yada. Danny DeVito, what the hell are you talking about? My general objective during the demo, and its testament to the engrossing nature of Tears of the Kingdom experimentation that I'm only just now touching on what I was supposed to be doing, was to reach an island in the sky above me by using several other islands as stepping stones. As we saw in longtime producer Eiji Aonuma's gameplay presentation in March, Link can reach floating islands by standing on top of falling rocks, casting Recall on them, and riding them upward like elevators. In my demo, I discovered another way to access the Sky Realm, but I won't spoil it here. Per Nintendo's embargo restrictions, I'm not allowed to do so. Needless to say, getting to the first island was simple enough. So there is some stuff they aren't allowed to tell us, which is, it's good because I don't want it spoiled, but at the same time, I'm like, dude, what did you do? What did you do to get up on this island? Because I'm dying to know all the different ways. Obviously, rockets will be one of them, right? From there, my options opened up. I chose to use Ultra Hand to connect several Zonai fans and rockets, which Nintendo graciously included in my starting inventory. We'll get to that. To a giant floating block. By striking one of the fans, every Zonai item in the vicinity activated, sending my ad hoc barge gracefully toward the next island. I hopped off, placed my travel medallion, which is making its return from Breath of the Wild's Master Trials DLC, interesting, on the ground in case I fell back to Hyrule at any points, and glanced over at the next island, confident in my engineering skills. So that's cool to see the travel medallions coming back, so you can just kind of have a fast travel point wherever you go. I don't know if I'm going to get through all 6 of these. I didn't realize how big these were. At this point, I hit a snag. The next island was about 300 feet higher than my current elevation. I could create another barge with its rockets and fans rotated to account for the steep angle, but the Zonai items might have run out of battery and meter that can be increased throughout a playthrough on the way up. So that's cool. So you can get better battery life, it seems. It's not about just how much juice you put in there. Or maybe it is about that, but either way, you can increase the battery life of, you know, these Zonai artifacts and all these things you create with the blue goop or green goop. This is the kind of game where you have such a useful array of game-breaking superpowers that you regularly forget to use one or two of them for long stretches of time. At one point, a duo of bokoblins rolled a spiked ball down a ramp toward me, a la Indiana Jones. Emboldened, I ran toward the hazard, fused it with one of my spears, and beat the living hell out of the perpetrators with the very weapon they had tried to use against me. Hours later, over dinner, or maybe in bed, I realized that I could have cast Recall on the ball and spit back up the ramp and into those bokoblins' faces. I imagine we'll lose a lot of sleep to retroactive revelations like that once Tears of the Kingdom is released. I won't detail how I got to the final island in the demo, because the experimentation process is the game, and to go on at length about my trial and error hijinks would be to spoil the joy of discovery in Tears of the Kingdom. Suffice to say, the method I found, which may or may not be the one you should stumble upon, involved a catapult, a rickety airplane, and the realization that there was a far, far simpler solution in front of me the whole time. But no matter what, I got there somehow. It's this freedom to toy with a game's systems that first drew me to immersive sims in the early aughts and sparked my interest in games made by Arcane, IO, and the late Looking Glass studio, which helped popularize the genre in the first place. Breath of the Wild, by most accounts, was an immersive sim itself. Its alchemical brew of crafting, cooking, weather effects, and stealth, all surrounded by its nuanced physics system. As I write this, thinking back on my brief time with Tears of the Kingdom, my mind is racing with the things I didn't try. Few games have met my goblin tendencies with their own goblin tendencies so confidently. My looming concern is whether the bounty of tools Tears of the Kingdom provides might be overwhelming in the long run. Furthermore, just how much sustained prodding can it take? At what point might I appear behind the curtain to see something that they intend on me discovering? Tears of the Kingdom seems intent on allowing chaos to thrive, and that's a dangerous game to play. So I really like this preview because, you know, it just focuses on the game. I'm sure some of these other previews will talk about performance and you know, other abilities and stuff like that, but this preview just focuses on what the hardcore of us are excited about, and that's just the infinite possibility of these new mechanics that Link has in Tears of the Kingdom. I just spent almost 10 minutes reading one preview, so let's go ahead and get into the next one. We're going to read through IGN's preview now. This is from Brian Altano, I believe, here. Scroll up, that's a long preview, but it is by Brian, Mr. Altano here. It should come as a surprise to exactly nobody that the Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom is going to be an absolutely massive video game with a staggering amount of things to do and see. After all, it's the follow-up to Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, one of the most biggest, deepest, and rewarding open-world games ever made. But what truly caught me off guard with my time playing Tears of the Kingdom wasn't just how much there was to do, and there were certainly tons. It was just how much creative freedom I had as I attempted to take on every corner of it so far. Breath of the Wild's core philosophy was effectively see that landmark in the distance? You can walk there. In Tears of the Kingdom, it's more like, see that landmark in the distance? Well, you have 100 ways to get there now, and a lot of them might not work, but when one does, oh boy, you're going to feel like a genius. So, similar vibe here. Similar vibe already. People, Brian Altano here saying, like, you can just do anything, man. Breath of the Wild, I feel like in hindsight to this, is going to end up looking almost archaic and limited. And that game was, at the time, super, genre pushing. Using some parts lying around, I decided to make a goofy double-decker bomber jet to fly through the skies in style. I couldn't tell you why I decided to make a double-decker, besides I thought it looked cool at the moment, and really sometimes that's reason enough. So that's also something we haven't really seen, I don't think, is with Ultra Hand you can make these flying machines, but you could probably make layered for some reason. I don't know why you'd want to. Maybe you could make like just a 2-layered plane, right? And like the bottom layer is full of like barrels or something, right? Explosive barrels. And on top, Link's flying it, and then you tilt it a certain way, and like 30 barrels just fall off on top of an enemy camp, that kind of thing. And was Puzzle, a stranded Korok trying to reunite with another Korok on a different sky island, needed help getting over there. And since he was wearing a large hiking backpack, so we've seen him in the trailer, or at least a similar Korok, I was able to use Ultra Hand to pick him up and put him in a minecart and get him back to his buddy, netting me 2 Korok seeds as a reward. So we'll see how often these exceptions appear in the world at large. Hopefully there are enemies with decorative bags or accessories on them that we're allowed to grab and throw around, because chucking a kitted out Bokoblin into the clouds would be a fun alternative to just stabbing it. What? Don't judge me. So that's cool. Well, I mean, that confirms a couple things. We knew Koroks were back. We didn't know if it would be the same prize, right? Korok seeds, but it is. And safe to assume it's probably just for inventory space again. So that's really interesting. Of course, they're gonna, I saw one preview where the Bokoblin actually had armor on, like it was just straight up armor. So that's kind of probably what he's talking about there, right? You can probably use Ultra Hand on that because it's wearing like this armor, and kind of just manipulate it that way. Back to my goofy double-decker bomber jet. Using 2 large fans that were conveniently in the area, I stuck them to some ship parts using Ultra Hand, and then pulled a steering stick Zonai device out of my inventory to give my ship some maneuverability while flying the mostly friendly skies. Zonai devices are new to this time around, and you'll be able to find them in giant capsule toy-looking machines scattered around the world. Yeah, we've seen those. The Gachapon machine, right? The devices have a variety of looks and abilities, and they can generally be used to manipulate or enhance objects around you or in your hands. One example I saw was a rocket-shaped Zonai device that, when fused to Link's shield, allowed him to rocket jump into the sky anywhere, similar to Revali's Gale from Breath of the Wild. That's what I like to hear. Let me some Revali's Gale. Only this time is limited to your number of rockets on hand, rather than being an ability that needs to recharge, which is definitely going to lead to some crazy and clever puzzle and combat solutions. Right, I mean, think about that, right? Revali's Gale couldn't be used in shrines, or, right? So, obviously, we still haven't seen shrines. These people didn't get to play shrines, or if they did, we didn't get that preview today. If you can use rockets in shrines, I mean, that could theoretically completely break them. And then they just keep talking about, building things. And, I mean, that's what we get here. I'm more curious, do any of these... Yeah, okay, they mentioned the travel medallion again. I want to see anything about performance, right? Okay, here we go. Thank you, Brian. Everything I played ran at a consistent frame rate so far, at least. Breath of the Wild was a launch game for the Nintendo Switch and ran into occasional dips in frame rate in dense outdoor areas like the Korok Forest. For years, Nintendo fans have speculated that Tears of the Kingdom would launch alongside a more powerful Nintendo Switch Pro model, so bigger, more resource-intensive games wouldn't run into frame rate issues. But unless Nintendo has been secretly hiding a next-gen console for the Tears of the Kingdom launch day, spoilers to not, then the 6-year-old Switch hardware will have to do. Most of the sections I played of Tears of the Kingdom took place in the sky and ran fairly smoothly, so we'll have to wait and see how things fare once Link starts fighting a bunch of enemies in a thick forest in the vast Hyrule down below the clouds. Either way, if you didn't personally have an issue with those things in Breath of the Wild, you'll probably be fine here too. So it sounds like performance is probably going to be much of the same, right? It's not going to be 60 FPS, obviously. It's going to be 30 and have dips below that. I mean, the Switch is 6 years old. It's going to have these same dips. I think it's probably overall going to run a little bit better than Breath of the Wild, because Breath of the Wild was made for the Wii U, whereas this game is made for the Switch, and maybe it wasn't optimized as well as it could have been because it was primarily developed for Wii U. So hopefully this one does a little bit better there. And then they kind of cap off here just saying, from Ultra Hand of Fuse to dozens of Sky Islands, this game the rare direct sequel to a previous Zelda game feel the most fresh so far. That's because lots of animations, objects, outfits, sounds, and more feel very similar to Breath of the Wild, which is admittedly a slight letdown based on how much of that game hinged around surprise and discovery, but Tears of the Kingdom is layered, or tiered, and the way you interact with it, nearly everything has evolved in creative and dramatic ways, so I have little doubt that there won't be a million new things to do and see in the full game. For now, I'm getting not to only experience it all myself, but to also see how the surely massive player base will make and break this game in brilliant and silly ways. It's sounding good, man. I think we'll just do one more here from, the Washington Post. I believe this is GM Park. During my Tears of the Kingdom session, I unlocked the entrance to a sky dungeon. Sky dungeon? What's, what sky dungeon are you talking about there, GM Park? I'm curious about that, because, I haven't seen anybody else mention dungeons. Hold up. I wonder if he just means, like, he unlocked an area in the sky, because everybody else was talking about how they had to explore to get there. Thanks to the addition of underground and sky areas, there also appears to be far more area to explore than what was available in the also gargantuan Elden Ring, a game that famously seemed to get bigger the more you play thanks to the addition of underground and sky areas. Tears of the Kingdom includes underground cave networks, not just on the ground, but within the Sky Island. So this is something Gene Park's really focusing on, is that he keeps comparing it to Elden Ring, saying it's significantly bigger than, or at least that it seems to be bigger than Elden Ring, which was a huge game, right? So that's very promising there as well. Even in failure, the game may reward your ability to improvise. I built an airplane that took off from the ground in an attempt to reach a sky shrine. Sky shrine? What are you talking about there? Are you talking about shrines, or are you talking about like that building that looks like a shrine, like a typical Japanese shrine? I'm on to you. I didn't have enough fuel to land at the top of the island, but I had just enough to fly close to the bottom. As my plane exploded without fuel, I performed a somersault jump onto the underside of the island and climbed up to my destination. It was messy, but it worked. With all these features, Link is also considerably more difficult to control, and this is something I saw a couple people complaining about on Twitter here. The game, quote, demands dexterity as the player uses every shoulder button alongside the directional pad, and every button has multiple uses depending on the mode Link is in, whether it is Fuse or Ultra Hand. I kept forgetting the recall feature existed. Rotating objects grabbed by the Ultra Hand can get confusing, especially if you were just in the Fuse mode. Even 70 minutes was not enough to warm up for all of the buttons to feel natural. It's probably going to take a few hours before tasks feel like second nature. So that's something that I feel like I recently replayed Breath of the Wild, and even that game is pretty intensive just in terms of how many buttons you press and what buttons do what and what menus open what menus and that kind of thing. So with Tears of the Kingdom, they're adding just a lot more in terms of what you can actually interact with, you know, with Ultra Hand and all that. You can do like the gyro and you have to move it around. That shows like freaking diagrams and you know what I'm talking about. So controls being an issue, honestly, that's not very surprising. But when, I mean, like you said, you get a couple hours in with it, you'll probably be fine. But it's definitely not going to be the most easy thing to pick up and play if you're new to video games. There are story details as well as gameplay features that Nintendo didn't want us to see or don't want us to talk about. Toward the end of the demonstration, when I reached the entrance to the aforementioned Sky Dungeon, I was asked by representatives not to enter. But I tried to skydive or fly to other parts of the map, above and below ground. There was a gigantic large square just floating off to the horizon, and an enigmatic temple from the 2017 game and now looming ominously. So there's just straight up a dungeon, it sounds like, one of these. Well, I was going to say opening sky islands, but you know what? Actually, these aren't the opening sky islands that we've seen before, are they? Because in this screenshot, he has, I don't know, is that 15 hearts maybe? I'm not going to sit here and count it. So maybe this is just like an actual like main plot dungeon, not a shrine, on one of these sky islands. Very interesting. I think I'm going to end it there. I wanted to cover more previews, but these are really long previews, and eventually they all kind of start saying mostly the same things, but those are the main things I'm hearing. Controls are kind of iffy. Frame rate is fine, but, you know, presumably it's probably not going to be great in some areas. But the creative freedom in Tears of the Kingdom is unlike anything anybody's ever seen in a video game, and that is so exciting. I'll probably do another video later today or tomorrow going over all the new footage we have and all the new information of actual gameplay. I was definitely showing some of Game Explain's footage throughout this video here as well, so you'd be able to enjoy that while you're watching. But it's exciting, man. We are 2 weeks away, basically, a little over 2 weeks away from Tears of the Kingdom releasing, and I feel like we know so much, but I feel like we still know nothing. It's crazy how big this game is. So let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. What do you think of these previews from the press regarding Tears of the Kingdom? Did they get you more excited, less excited? I don't know how, if you're watching this video, you probably just got more excited. I can't imagine this would disappoint you in any way. Maybe the frame rate thing, I guess, but even then they said it was actually solid for what they saw. So It's all looking pretty damn good. Until next time, subscribe here for more Tears of the Kingdom content, as well as general Nintendo coverage. Follow me on Twitter at BoTalksGames. Join the Discord that is linked down below. And until next time, folks, peace.